Hey everyone, welcome to the Inside Indiana video podcast thing. I'm Seth Tao.
Ben Ladner. It looks like we're on two different screens here because of the corner of the wall. It looks like we're two separate, but we're not. We're in the same place.
Oh yeah, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, you see that?
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Maybe this is that new laptop.
Yeah.
graphics.
Sharp image.
Yeah. We are in the media school in Bloomington right now. We're going to talk a little bit about tomorrow's big game between IU and number one Duke, as the Blue Devils are coming to Assembly Hall, which should be rocking tomorrow night. Game tips at 9:30 on ESPN. It's obviously a bit of a mismatch here for Indiana. The Blue Devils just have so much size inside.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with Marvin Bagley, the number one recruit in the class, despite reclassifying from the 2018 high school class to the 2017 high school class. He's just a handful. It's really rare to see a guy his size with the combination of not just explosiveness that he has, but the fluidity as well. I mean, the guy, he moves like a guard. I mean, you watch him move, and it looks like, a 6'2" guard out there. Just, he's so fluid, and he can really get up, and he pursues rebounds like maybe no one that Indiana will see there. I mean, he just attacks the ball, especially in the offensive glass, and he has the tools to get rebounds, but a lot of guys have the tools to get rebounds. He actually has, the pursuit and the relentlessness on the boards to actually go and get them. He makes an effort for every single rebound. He's a guy that Indiana has to keep off the boards if they want to have a chance. Duke leading the nation in offensive rebound percentage, and that's, if you give this team extra possessions by turning it over or not boxing out on the defensive glass, you're doomed. And also Wendell Carter inside. I mean, it's unfair to have these two guys, the number 1 and 4 players in the class. Carter is a supremely skilled big guy, another guy who he moves like he's a guard, and he's 6'10". So they're just going to be a handful to manage, and it's going to be really important for De'Ron Davis to stay out of foul trouble in this one, because he's struggled with that all season long, and against these guys who can get you in the air, get to the free throw line, and take advantage of you, he's going to have to be really careful not to reach in and go for blocks that he can't get. You got to stay smart against these guys.
Yeah, that's the exact point I was going to make, because I don't know if you watched the Duke-Texas game last weekend, but the game really started to turn really in Duke's favor when Mo Bamba fouled out. I don't remember if that was at the end of regulation or in overtime.
And Florida's center fouled out as well towards the end of that game, I believe.
Right. So, I mean that's just when these games start to turn towards Duke is when they get those big guys out of the game. And the difference between some of these other teams that Duke may have played in Indiana is that De'Ron Davis may be the only guy that can really match up well with guys like Bagley and Carter, because behind De'Ron Davis, if he goes to the bench, you have Freddie McSwain at the 5, and that's worked in some stretches this year, but against a team with this size and a team this talented, you're not going to want to go to Freddie McSwain at the 5 for very long, and if obviously Davis is in foul trouble, their hands are tied.
Well, that's interesting, because I actually think McSwain is a better matchup for Bagley than Davis. I think Bagley is probably better on Carter. I think he will guard Wendell Carter. But I would really, if I were Indiana, I would really not want to take my chances by putting by putting De'Ron Davis on Marvin Bagley. I just think Bagley is too quick and too skilled, and he'll just toast him. And that is a certain way to lead to foul trouble for De'Ron Davis.
How much do you think that we might see McSwain and Davis on the court together with Bagley and Carter on the court together?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's more likely we'll see more of De'Ron Davis and Juwan Morgan, obviously, because they're the starters. We haven't seen that much of Archie Miller. Has really not played his big guys together that often.
I mean,
the big guys that he has.
In fairness, when Davis, it's probably because of how much Davis fouls, and you can't risk having both of those guys getting into quick.
But I don't think the McSwain Davis combo is one that we've seen at that much, if at all, this year, right? I mean, I can't remember a time where those two shared the floor together, and it could work. I don't think you can have that many non-shooters on the floor, because I think that Indiana has to hit some threes against Duke to even have a chance. And Juwan Morgan is not some great three-point shooter. He's not hit a three all year. But I would rather he stretch the floor a little bit than Freddie McSwain, who was at this point a net neutral at best on offense. And maybe we see Justin Smith log some more time at the 4 as well. He can shoot it a little bit, but I just think you can't afford to have 2 non-shooters.
The guy that might, if he's able to, that might be able to see a lot of minutes at the 4 is Colin Hartman.
Yeah.
Colin Hartman, I mean, you want 3-point shooting, you got it with Colin Hartman, and I mean, Hartman, I mean, we don't talk about his defense that much. He's a good defender.
Yeah.
He's a good defender, and I mean, he's not the type that's going to be able to really body a guy like Marvin Bagley, but he's a scrappy defender. He can really make Bagley work for his buckets, which you'll take what you can get against Marvin Bagley.
Exactly, and even if he is overwhelmed on defense, I think anyone you stick on Marvin Bagley is probably going to be overwhelmed on defense. So, if you take that into account and you say, okay, well, if that's the case, we might as well just get as much shooting on the floor as we can, then Hartman is definitely your guy there, because Duke is probably going to play a zone at some point, if not for long stretches of this game. Indiana's seen zone before this year. They know how to handle it.
The last game.
Right. And Howard, too, played a zone. But Duke's zone is different from those other zones that Indiana's seen. They have so much more length and athleticism. Yeah. They're better coached. But Duke's zone has been vulnerable at times this year. I mean, Michigan State was able to exploit it a few times in the season opener, or in the early season game between those two teams. Texas and Florida were both able to exploit it a little bit and generate some threes off of that. If you can get the ball into the heart of the zone, Justin Smith has been a guy that's been really effective in the high post area, and kick it out to shooters or dump it down to the other big guy in the short corner, or even take that 15-foot jumper yourself. That opens up a lot of things, but you have to be able to penetrate the zone either off the dribble or via the pass. And because Duke, if you get it in the heart of that zone, you can sort of mitigate the advantage that Duke has because of their length. Like, you take Trayvon Duval out of the play essentially because he's behind you, and he's their most dangerous defender at the point of attack. And then you have a numbers advantage with whoever has the ball at the high post and your 2 shooters and your other big guy. But that's where you need to get the ball, and you got to find the soft spots in the zone. And at the end of the day, you have to knock down shots. If you don't knock down shots against Duke, you're toast. Yeah.
Right, and I think the guy that's the biggest key to that getting that penetration you were talking about is Al Durham.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen in the first 6 games, Al Durham's fearless driving the ball into the lane. I mean, he will go in on pretty much anybody, it seems like, and he's just not afraid to go in and try something, try to make a play. I mean, we've seen him throw up a few lefty floaters that have gone in. I mean, he's just absolutely fearless, and I think Indiana's going to need that kind of fearlessness going up against a team with this length trying to penetrate that zone.
Yeah, and he's only a freshman, but Al Durham might already be the best player on the roster in terms of dribble penetration and just getting where he wants to off the dribble, because he's so purposeful with his dribble. He can cover 15 feet with one dribble, not because he's Giannis Antetokounmpo with these giant strides and giant. But he puts the ball down, takes a big jump stop. He's able to cover a lot of ground just by making good hard moves. And like you said, he's fearless. He'll put the ball on the ground. He'll go up against anybody. He'll try some things off the dribble that a lot of people won't. And so far, he hasn't turned the ball over when he's done that, which is all the more impressive.
He's gone 130 minutes or something like that without turning it over.
I think he's been getting a lot of minutes here recently. I think that's got to continue. I wouldn't be surprised if he started. I don't think he will start, but it would not shock me by any means, just because the way he's been shooting the ball and the way he's been able to take care of the ball and play off of the dribble. I think that skill set is just so valuable against Duke, who has these individual defenders that can just take people out of the game.
Yeah, and I honestly think as Durham has started to get more and more confident with each passing game, I think that's contributed to Robert Johnson and Josh Newkirk shooting the ball better in the past few games.
Yeah, I think it takes some of the pressure off those guys, and Newkirk had a really good game against Eastern Michigan. Robert Johnson, a few games before that, was able to go off against who was it? Was it Arkansas State? So a couple of those tune-up games in between. But yeah, I mean, those guys have had some big games recently, and those season percentages are starting to bump up a little bit after those early season struggles. And I mean, if you can use Newkirk and Johnson as spot-up shooters, I think they're more effective than if they're primary playmakers and doing everything themselves. That's what we've seen from Grayson Allen this year to bring it back to Duke. I mean, the last 2 years, he was almost Duke's point guard because they just didn't really have that many guys on the roster that could create and that were talented enough to draw an entire defense's attention. This year, they have just a wealth of talent, and Grayson Allen has turned into one of the best off-ball players in the nation. I mean, he moves without the ball, he comes off screens, he spots up around other guys, and he's become such a more efficient player because of it, just because the defense doesn't have to pay, the defense can't pay as much attention to him, and he's able to take advantage of the creation of his teammates. And I think Johnson and Newkirk are able to do that with Durham as well.
Yeah, it's almost reminiscent of Maryland last year with Mello Trimble.
Yeah.
He was a point guard his first 2 years, and then they got Cowan in there, and he was able to kind of play off ball more, and he was even more lethal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be a tough go for Indiana. Well, it could be closer than expected.
Yeah.
I mean, the
home crowd.
You
never know. You never know.
The hall is going to be rocking,
Yeah.
and especially with so many young guys. I mean, I mean, Duke has played on the road so far. They were at the PK80 tournament, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be their first really hostile environment that they've seen.
Yeah, they've played one true road game on the season, and it was one of those early season games against a team that they probably pay to play them, and you get that easy win at the beginning of the season. They have not faced a crowd like Assembly Hall. I mean, obviously Cameron Indoor Stadium is its own animal, but
it's
different when the noise is for you
right.
than against you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you're right. They have not gone into a hostile environment at all this year.
And this is a team that really starts for a freshman, right?
Yes, and so you have all these young guys. Maybe they get rattled, and also Duke is a team they've gotten behind in games before. I mean, they were behind at halftime against all three opponents in the PK80. They were behind against Michigan, and all four of those games required second half runs to get back in the game. I mean, Duke was out of some of those games, and just by virtue of having so much talent and shot making, they're able to get back in it. But it wouldn't surprise me if Indiana were up at halftime, and obviously Duke is going to make their run, and they have some firepower on that team. But maybe Indiana gets up early, they ride the home crowd, and they hope for a cold stretch in the second half. Because at some point, you got to feel like this Duke team is just going to run out of second half magic and maybe let one of these games slip.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference between this game and the IU North Carolina game last year was at this point in the season last year, you felt like Indiana could hang with anybody in the country. They'd already beaten Kansas, but this Duke team just feels so much more vastly talented than Indiana that it almost just feels inevitable. Like, okay, they're going to make their move eventually.
Yeah.
But
I wanted to ask you: do you think this is a bigger game than the UNC game? Not considering the rest of last season, just going into the game. Is this a bigger game than it was last year?
Well, hindsight's 20/20.
Right, I'm saying not including post UNC last year.
I don't know. That's tricky, just because you don't really know what the impact is going to be if they win this game and where that.
Right. No, I'm just saying heading into the game.
Yeah. I would say the North Carolina game was a little bit bigger, but I mean, this is still a huge game. I mean, I think the UNC game was just a little bigger, just because they were already ranked at that point. They were like third in the country, and even though they were coming off a loss at that point. I mean, a win over Kansas and Carolina, which they ended up getting, was supposed to be big for their postseason resume, but we know how that went.
Not great.
Yeah. But
no, I would agree with you there.
Yeah. So this game tips off at 9:30 tomorrow night. That's Wednesday in Bloomington Assembly Hall. We will both be there. Ben will be on the call on WIUX.
Me and David Sugarman.
And I will be doing all the reporting on Inside Indiana. Ben will have stuff later too, but be sure to stay with us for all that coverage. And that's all we got. So enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and we will be back with you tomorrow.